Hey everyone, now you guys know how to unwrap cubes and cylinders in Blender, we're going to be covering how to unwrap this more complex object. To follow along, make sure to download the free blend file in the description below so you can follow along with this model. We'll start off by setting up our UV workspace. So I'm going to bring my mouse to the top left hand corner of the 3D viewport where this cross shape will appear. Then I can left click to hold and then drag to bring out a second 3D viewport. Then I'm going to left click the editor type here to change it to UV editor. Right now we won't be able to see anything, so I'm going to come back to my 3D viewport and press tab to go into edit mode and press A to select all. You can see right now, since this object started as a cube, it's just added all of these extra extrusions I made on top. Now we've taken a look at the UV, there's one thing we need to do before we start unwrapping. First, I'm going to press tab to go back into object mode, and to start off I'll press Ctrl and then A. This is going to open up the apply menu, and it's important that we apply the scale, and we can also apply the rotation by pressing Ctrl A and choosing rotation. The reason we've done this first is because if our scale isn't correct, as I've mentioned in previous UV unwrapping tutorials, the proportions in the UV editor won't match proportions of the actual object. The scale usually gets changed when we scale things inside of object mode, but I always like to apply the scale and the rotation before I UV unwrap just to be safe. I'm now going to press tab to go back into edit mode, and we can start UV unwrapping. To start off, this UV unwrap, this cube part here, and you're going to start to see as we do this that pretty much unwrapping most things is just combining a bunch of cylinder unwraps with cube unwraps. So for a cube, a good thing I like to think to remember it is we're going to have a total of 4 U shapes with our seams. So to start off, I'm going to press 2 on the keyboard to go into edge select mode, and I'm going to select here, going to create our first U by then control left clicking this edge here, control left clicking here, and then control left clicking here. And now you can see this has created a U shape. These here are going to be cut, and that's going to create a nice flap there. Then we can shift left click these edges here, and then control left click these edges here, and you can see now we have 2 U shapes. Then I can shift left click these 2 edges and then control left click this edge here, and that's given us our third and 4th U. I can then press Control E to open up my edge menu and choose mark seam. Then I can press A, U, and then unwrap, and right now you can see it's started to unwrap everything. You can see how our most prominent shape here has been successfully unwrapped. However, you can see our cylinders and things getting poked out are just being squashed down into 2D. It doesn't look very appealing. Now we've done that, let's move on to our second cube shape here. To start off, nice and simply, I'm just going to completely cut off this cube from the other one to make it easy to understand. So to do that, in this case, all I would need to do is press Alt left click, and that's going to select that entire loop there, but you can also select them manually as well. Then I'll press Ctrl E again and choose mark seam. Now when I press AU and then unwrap, you can see it's now separated out that cube shape, although it's kind of struggling to unwrap it. Then to finish unwrapping this cube, we just gotta think about how we can get this to fold out. So we can maybe just select these 4 edges here by shift left clicking them like this. And what this is going to do is when I mark it as a seam, it'll be making cuts along these edges. And remember, there's a cut here, so there's nothing actually connected here in the 2D space. And that's just going to fold right open for us. So now I'll just press Ctrl E and choose mark seam. Then I can press A, U, and then unwrap. And now you can see we've got that cross shape. Alright, that's the 2 cube shapes. Let's go ahead and move on to the cylinders. At the front here we have this kind of more cone-like cylinder, which has a bit of a taper to it. To start off, we need to separate it from the cube. So I'm going to press Alt left click on this edge here, and then I'm going to choose Ctrl E to open the edge menu and choose mark seam. Then, if you remember how to unwrap a cylinder, it's very simple. We just need to select the edges on the other circle. So if I press Alt left click, you'll notice it only select 2 edges. So instead we can just left click one of the edges and press Control left click and just select all the way around like that. Then we can either press Control E again, or we can right click if we're in edge select mode, which is 2 in the keyboard in edit mode, and choose mark seam. Then I'm going to want to choose another seam to allow this to be flattened out, because if I press AU and then unwrap, you can see it's separated that one face, but everything else is still being squished out, and that's because this entire loop of faces is all connected. If we were to be texturing this with a square based texture, then I would choose this one under here just to make sure it's in the least visible spot. However, if you're doing texture painting or texture baking, any one of these edges will be fine. However, I like to keep my options flexible, so it's just good practice to select this one underneath since it's the least visible seam. Then once I've got that edge selected, I can press Ctrl E again and choose mark seam. Now when I press A then U to open the unwrap menu and choose unwrap, you can see it's separated out these faces into its own island. Next up, let's go for this cylinder here. Now this cylinder is actually going inside the object. So to start off, we need to separate it from the cube. So I'm going to Alt left click this edge here, which is the one which connects it to the cube, and I'm going to press Ctrl E and choose Mark Seam. Then we can press Alt left click on this edge here, and you'll notice again it's not going to select the whole loop. So instead what we can do is just press Ctrl left click to start selecting all of these edges around here. Then I can right click again and choose Mark Seam. Finally, I can choose this edge here and right click and Mark Seam. And the reason I've done that is because if I don't make a cut here, it's just going to try squash down these faces again because it'd still be connected. A bit like how I've done with this cylindrical object here. Then I'll press A, U, and then unwrap that as well. And now you can see things are starting to come together. Here's the island that is representing this little bit here. And we have circle, I believe it's this one here. If you want to check which one's which, you can turn on the arrows and you can left click deselect everything and then press L. And yeah, we can see it's that face there. I'll turn off the arrows for now. And I'm going to move on to the next cylindrical object, which is actually our final one. So this one, as you can see, is a little bit more complex because it has multiple layers to it, but it's not actually too difficult to unwrap. I'll start off by pressing Alt left click on this edge loop here, and then I'm going to press Shift left click to select one of our edges to flatten out faces here, and then I can press Shift Alt left click on this edge loop here, and that's our first cylinder. So I'm going to right click and then choose Mark Seam. Now when I press A, U and unwrap, you can see it's unwrapped part of the cylinder here, and this top face has kind of been distorted because we haven't unwrapped. For this bit here, press Alt left click here, then we can go ahead and just unwrap this cylinder like normal by shift left clicking this edge here, shift left clicking this edge here, and then control left clicking all around these edges. And then we can right click in edge select mode and choose Mark Seam. So if I now press A, U and then unwrap, you can see that's now unwrapping everything properly. However, you can see if I zoom in here, this has a big hole here, which could be a problem if you want to optimize texture space. Now we have a nice unwrap. However, you might not want these things rotated, in which case you could rotate them manually. Before I move on to that, first thing I'm going to do is press A, U, and then unwrap again. And the reason I've done this is because we forgot to set the margin. So in this unwrap box here, I can left click to open it. I'm just going to change my margin to 0.01. Also, make sure that the margin method is set to scaled, as sometimes you might accidentally change it. That's going to make sure everything has a gap between it by default. And yeah, that's how we would unwrap a more complex object. Although if you want to rotate and move these islands around, in the next video we're going to be learning more about UV islands, why they're important, and how to move, scale and rotate them. Also, if you want to straighten out your islands like this one here, make sure to check out my video on straightening out UV islands. You can find all these videos in the playlist here on all my UV unwrapping videos. Apart from that though, I'd like to thank you so much for watching and congratulate you for making it this far in UV unwrapping. You're definitely getting much more proficient at it by now if you've been following the tutorials. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.